let's take for example, yeah, let's say we sign just to make it easy, like a 500K engagement. So from a bookings perspective, you go, cool. This quarter we booked, $500,000 project, awesome. But from a recognition, like how it might show up in the weighted pipeline view, how do we kind of think about it? And let's say this is a you know 8-month project, right? And
Hmm.
so what is that? And then let's say just so 62K, $62,500 a month, let's say over the next 8 months. How should we think about that in terms of how it shows up on the weighted pipeline?
So we would break it down, and the other thing that's important is when that's starting. You could sign it now, but maybe it's kicking off in 2 months for whatever reason. In your future pipeline, you'll show a 2 month gap and then 62,500 for 8 months beyond that,
Right.
month over month. And then, yeah, so you might see a gap in your projections, but as much as possible, um, having some kind of sense of when the work will be delivered is important because, yeah, to your point, 500,000 project sounds great, but you don't know, is that like a short engagement, long engagement? Is that a 24-month engagement that you just signed? It's the timeline is very important.
Yeah, and this is like super important because at the end this all flows down to some of the things that we've talked about in the past, like cash flow management and all those things. Because you can have
Hmm.
a drought, let's say let's say you just have low revenue months, but then all of a sudden you sign a ton of business and you're like, oh, we're golden, but if those projects are not slated to start until months from now, you still might be in a drought and be in trouble, and like not be out of the out of the red until those projects start. So like I think this is like key for a lot of folks to think about is just because you sign stuff doesn't necessarily mean you're gonna be in the black.
Yeah, and the other layer there is if you sign a lot after a drought, you may need to staff up. You may need to staff up even more than what you have now. So you may have to increase your cost basis to deliver that work in the future. So being able to visualize that is important.
Yeah, and that goes all the way,
Yeah.
and then it's kind of like going back up all the things that we just talked about, like that the forecasted utilization might pop, and then all of a sudden your gross margins might go down. So this is all
Yeah.
stuff that as you get more comfortable, kind of, and these are just a handful of metrics, but like this is the core stuff, and there's a lot of nuance to this, and so as you kind of get more used to this stuff, you see how they play with each other, and then you can start to make decisions using these numbers. Yeah. All right. Cool. So that's the core. I mean, like, we kept it pretty simple. It's not that much stuff, but this is obviously, there's a lot other things that we can measure and we do. It's just, we keep it simple and we kind of think about these others as secondary numbers. And so maybe we could just quickly reel off some of the other things that we do consider and we layer on, but it's not just, as closely looked at as the other ones.
Yeah. And a lot of these also depend on kind of the stage of the business and how large you are, the maturity of the business. Like some of this stuff, if you're a small shop, like a few people, some of this stuff may matter less versus kind of a more mature organization. So I'll kind of rattle off a few of the other ones that we look at. Accounts receivables aging. I think that's uh, important to look at to make sure that you're actually getting paid by your clients. This is more for cash flow to make sure that on paper, from an accrual standpoint, you may be very profitable. But if no one is paying you and they haven't been paying you for months, it's probably a flag that you should take some action on. And that's an important one to make sure you're on top of.
Yep.
Another one is client concentration. So being sure uh, to understand how much of your revenue is coming from which client? So do you have one or two clients that make up 50% of your revenue? And that could be a risk if that one or two clients ends up canceling a project, churning, and then how do you replace that revenue in the future?
Correct. Yep.
Another is net revenue retention. So that number is looking at um, of the revenue that you did in one period of time, how much of your net, let's see, last year the client did X amount. This year, how much of that revenue can you expect in this year, or does that grow or shrink? So it's just really showing, are clients growing with us or are they churning year over year?
Yeah, and this is, it's important to note that, like, for one-time, like, project-based businesses, this number is going to be lower to some degree, and this is also why, going back to our initial revenue metric, like, if you can get clients on more of a recurring basis, then year to year, or quarter to quarter, you can have a higher net revenue retention number, because they're usually, like, if they spent whatever 25K in a quarter, and then the next quarter they're spending another 25K, then you basically retain them 100%. But and even better, if you've added some work on top of that, you could be over 100%. So I think
Hmm.
this is like an important number, that just especially as the business gets more mature and has some history to it, is going to be important to track.
Yeah. And related to that is looking at the client retention from the specific number of clients also is important, because net revenue retention can sometimes mask, there could be one client from the past that increases a lot that masks, other clients decreasing. So I think that, yeah, that number and who the clients are important to look at as well.
Yep.
Cool. On the employee side, looking at kind of employee retention as well, tenure, um, and if you can track employee satisfaction through a variety of ways, I think that could be important to show the overall kind of health and stability of the business.
Yeah, one of the things I like to think about is, like, employee satisfaction, and this could be like different, yeah, surveys you might send out, or just other measures. They might have, like, they have employee, like, NPS type of surveys you could send out too. But that's almost like a leading indicator, and then you could argue that, like, the turnover numbers of, like, yeah, like, like, what percentage of your employees do you retain year to year, could be like a lagging one. And then the ultimate lagging one is, like, your Glassdoor reviews. And so, like, you can kind of look at some numbers there. And obviously, yeah, if that number is suffering, then there's some kind of issues you might be having on the employee side.
Yeah, definitely. Cool. And last one here is project and client profitability. So we've kind of talked very high level at the, metrics, but breaking it down on a client level and project level of, you may have scoped it for a certain level of profitability, kind of going through, doing a debrief after each project and saying, all right, this is where we landed from an actual cost and delivery standpoint. And then as you do more and more projects or engagements with clients, you can say, all right, who are our most profitable clients over a period of time? And yeah, just make decisions as needed from there.